Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Law Symposium. I'm Dr. Joy Lopez, and I'm going to be talking to you today about remote, hybrid, and face-to-face teaching and the technology considerations in this new normal. So, a little bit about me. I have been 30 years in education. Most of that has been in technology and it has been in Catholic schools. I've taught from second grade to postgraduate. I prefer kids at least fourth grade and above. I'm a mom and a grandmother. And in 2006, I wrote a dissertation on how traditional teachers move their practice into the online environment. Now, little did I know how much and how important that information was going to be, as I had to help move our entire school online in the spring of 2020. This is a little bit about my school. So this is Sacred Heart Schools in Atherton, and that's a picture of our historic main building from 1898. We are 64 acres, and if you take a look at where Stanford University is, we are very, very close to that. So there are three separate campuses on our 64 acres. So I have a preschool, a first through 8, and a high school. And the population of the students is split, pretty much 600 at the high school and 600 at the P to 8. There's about 350 employees, and we are one-to-one technology in grades 1 to 12. Now, before the pandemic, students in grades 1 through 5 just had carts that they shared in their classrooms of Chromebooks. But we always had Chromebooks in 6 to 8 that they took home. And at the high school, they're BYOD. All that changed clearly when we went completely remote in March of 2020. And then we had to have students from kindergarten on taking home Chromebooks as well. Well, what do I hope you get out of this today? Well, I think we all know that this has been an exceptional year. You and your school have learned a great deal. As a matter of fact, this year has been a year of nothing but professional growth. But we're not through this yet. We still have to be prepared for other things. And we also learned so much that we need to take forward with us and figure out how we could use that in the future. Now, this year has been an amazing year and has really been the paradigm shift that I've been waiting for my entire career. I've been in education now for over 2 decades. And during this time, I kept expecting that the teachers who came out of graduate school and were ready to be our teachers would all be ready to implement technology seamlessly into their classrooms. I didn't realize that it was going to, that these people who were coming out of the colleges were still not prepared because their professors were not prepared and their professors were not proficient to model how to use technology effectively in a classroom. So this all changed with the pandemic. Who knew that it was going to actually take a global pandemic for me to see the changes in teachers that I had always wanted to see and that I'd always thought I would see? But that's what it took. So in a matter of a few days, teachers all of a sudden went from being traditional teachers to being fully online. Not the way I would have wanted to prepare them, but hey, that's all we could do. That's what we had to do. So now we have an entire workforce that is proficient in technology. So my question is, now what? Well, I don't know about you, but these were the early days of the pandemic for me. This is the way our teachers felt, that they were chained to their keyboards, that they were always on. They had a zillion apps to figure out which to use. And they just needed help. They needed help in everything they did. They just needed lots and lots of hand-holding and support as they were trying to figure out what to do with their students. I don't know any about you, but we had some Zoom bombers, some people just crashing into the Zoom, and those were the early days, and we had to figure that out. This is the way my team felt. All we did is felt like we were putting out fires everywhere and for everyone, not just faculty, but staff and students as well, trying to provide support. We learned how to do remote support. It was incredible. Now we're through it. Now we can sit back, we can look, we can see what we did, we can see what we learned, and what we still need to do as we move forward. So take a breath and let's kind of take a look at that. Let's start with our faculty. What did we consider when we were starting to go out into this pandemic? Well, we had to consider the physical tools that teachers were using, the management systems that they were using, How are they now going to deal with grades and attendance, evaluations? How are kids going to turn in homework? What was that digital work thing going to look like? We had to figure out how we were going to do any kind of a face-to-face interaction, even if the face-to-face was virtual. How are we going to present materials and engage our students? And then also we had to consider safety and balance with our students of workload and this pandemic that was going on, this entire change to their lives. What about students? What do we have to consider about them? We had to consider the schedule. I don't know about you, but we made many, many shifts in our schedule over the last year. There were things that worked and things that didn't work. We overloaded our younger grades with how much time they were spending online, and we had to make adjustments for that. We found that we had to do things differently for our different grades. Remember, we are a P through 12. And so what was working for our kindergartners wasn't working for our high schoolers and vice versa. We had to think of what the student interaction with our technology was, how we can make that easier. And for our younger grades, we had to do that for the parents as well, because the parents were the ones who were helping their kids at home. And last but not least, man, we had to think about how we were going to build community. Because as you know, in our Catholic schools, community is so important. So how are we going to keep that community when we were not able to see each other and have those organic kind of conversations like we do out here in the hallways? Well, these were our key learnings from the spring. We learned that we had to standardize the tools and the software. We had to keep it simple. We had to make it easy to use, easy for our younger grades, easy for our parents to help them. We had to be well planned and have important face-to-face time. So those interactions that we had with the kids virtually, they had to be very, very well planned. The teachers had to plan those out. The teachers had to figure out how to use break rooms, things like that, so that they could break it up. And we needed to have some fun. We needed to do something for the kids in fun ways and for the teachers as well. We also needed to offer more support, especially for our students with learning differences. We needed much, much more support. Now, and we needed more emotional support as well. So these were our key learnings from the spring. Now, you may have other ones, but these were the things as we went into that first summer, the summer of 2020, that we kept in mind. These were the biggies. These were the shifts we had to make before we started school in September of 2020. Now, you may have a few other ones. This is what I would highly encourage you to do, is come up with these key learnings. What were those things that you had to do that were your shifts? Because as we looked at these, and we had to try to keep all this stuff in our minds as we designed for the new year. Now, let's take a look, for example, of some of the things that our faculty wanted, that they needed to help them as they were moving into this new paradigm. One of the things that our teachers really found that they needed, many of them needed dual monitors, or they needed an external camera, standing desks, doc cams, iPads to write on, to maybe show on the document cameras, even portable whiteboards. One of the things that was really interesting is many of our teachers had to work from, since they were working from home, because remember in California, we were completely shut down for quite a while. They needed some kind of a background. They felt like their homes as their sanctuaries, that they were being invaded, and they often had to work in their bedrooms or places they didn't want the kids to really see. So we found places where they could go get backgrounds. We also did some interesting things. We taught them how to make their own backgrounds. We took pictures of their classrooms and sent them to them so they could make a background from it. And our teachers really appreciated just some of those simple things. Now, this is a picture actually of my daughter. She's a special ed teacher, and this was her desk. She borrowed a desk from the school. She didn't have a desk to work on at home. She always worked at the kitchen table. So she borrowed this desk, and then notice she has a portable whiteboard laying on the desk that she puts under the document camera that you see over there to her left. And she would project and write on that whiteboard and project it through the document camera into her Zoom room. So these were some of the things that teachers did. Now, I'm just going to point out a couple of other things here that were super important. One of them is headphones. You can see I'm actually wearing mine. I find that the headphones were incredibly important, not just for the teachers, but the students. It cut out all that background noise that was going on. and had them really focus in their heads on what was going on and the teacher was saying. Just in case you're interested, here's a couple of the document cameras that I found were the most successful in my school. So the one there, the large one there, is called a Just Stand. I luckily purchased these early into 2020, as soon as the pandemic hit. They went up well over $100 more by the end of that summer, and they were out of stock. They were out of stock for months, but these were simple and they were inexpensive and they fold up flat. They're just wonderful. They also will turn and rotate, so you can actually make them look at the teacher or down. Our art teachers love them because they could use them to flip them up and they could demonstrate something and then show it back down on the project. So these held an iPad, and they don't have to be a new iPad, so they can be just about anything, really. The one on the right is an iPivo, and that one is much more expensive, but it is fantastic. And incredible optics on that camera. Our math teachers love this one. Here's some homemade ones. Just Google DIY document camera, and here's some ones that were really interesting to make that people just did with their phones or iPads, and they worked perfectly well for the teachers. Let's talk a little bit about Zoom. Excuse me. Now, many of you had some other way of doing the interaction, the face-to-face interaction. You might have used Hangouts or WebEx or something else. We used Zoom. We just decided that that was the one we wanted, so we went with it. Zoom was fantastic. They actually opened up their 45-minute time limit during the pandemic. That's closed, but they did open that up, which was great. We purchased quite a bit of Zoom licenses because what our teachers wanted to do and also what our admin wanted to do required them to have licensing. We purchased 2 large rooms. Now, a large Zoom room allows you to have up to 500 people in it. And we use those for class meetings. And what it is it's like having a regular Zoom classroom, but it's like putting extra chairs in it. So now you had 500 chairs in there. So you still had all the boxes, and it was pages and pages of boxes, but you could make breakout rooms. You could do all sorts of things. I helped actually our Sacred Heart Network sisters. They needed to do their network meeting. And I think we had, oh gosh, I can't remember how many sisters we had on there, well over 100 sisters on there, all in breakout rooms and everything. And I helped them with the tech part of it. And it was fantastic because they could go into their breakout rooms and they could do their discussions. And then they could come back together for centering and things, and it would, and sharing. Worked really well. So those large rooms were incredibly helpful for some groups as well. Our parent association also used them. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we use Zoom, and Zoom worked really well for us. So whatever you used, you need to survey your faculty and staff now and find out if it's something they still want to use. We found that we had to have our software for our remote teaching. Learning management system was a must. Now, we'd always used learning management systems. Some teachers used them really well, and some teachers only used the very basic they could get by with. Well, everybody had to be trained, and everybody had to use it much more efficiently. Same with our course management softwares. So we actually had 3 different ones we used. We found, and this was from our learnings from the spring of 2020. So we standardized things for the beginning of 2020, 2021. So we use Seesaw for K3. We use Google Classroom for 4 to 8 and Schoology for 9 to 12. Now, Google Classroom and Schoology had already been used, so it wasn't much of a flip, right? They just had to learn to use some more tools of it, but they still knew it. Seesaw was new to quite a few of our teachers, and so we had to provide that training for them. But it worked out really well for those little grades. We also, a big thing we did was to use something called Clever. Now, Clever allows you, it's a Google interface, and Clever allows you to where you sign into Clever. Once you're in Clever, all of your other tools are there, and most of them are single sign-on, so you're automatically logged into them. This was incredibly helpful for our lower grades. So one of the big complaints our parents had when we first got into the pandemic was that they didn't know where to go, and there was a zillion different logins for the kids. So we put it all together in Clever, the kids just signed into Clever, and all of their tools were right there in front of them on a dashboard. It was great. So many of you, I'm sure, have used Clever. It was really fantastic for us. You can see some of the presentation things that we used. Some of these were, we had already used, like we had teachers using Animoto or VoiceThreads already, but it became much more widespread and teachers started sharing their knowledge, and I started having to buy a lot more licenses. For screencasting, for the teachers to do screencasting and for the students to do it for presentations, one of the biggest ones I can recommend is Screencastify. It is a free Google plugin, and it is super simple to use. Our 6th to 8th graders used to use it all the time on their Chromebooks, so we just expanded that, and everybody started using it. Camtasia and Snagit are fantastic and do more than Screencastify, but they also cost, and so it's up to you whether you want to get something like that. Now I'm just going to leave you with this for a second. You can take a look at some of these. These are I just wanted to give you a bunch of software that we found really excellent for the remote teaching. A lot of these teachers, again, had used, but they wanted to expand it, or they wanted the paid licenses as opposed to the ones with all the advertising. They wanted all the bells and whistles, because when you pay for them, you get a lot more bells and whistles. And at the end of this year, I surveyed the teachers and I said, okay, so what did you use and what are you going to use forward, right? What are you going to use? I mean, really, tell me the truth. How many of these licenses are you going to use again next year? And I'll keep them, but I just want to know. It was amazing to me. The teachers now, before it was like pulling teeth sometimes to get teachers to use some of these. Once they really started using them, the teachers are sold. And they unanimously asked me to keep these things. Jamboard is one I love because, number one, it's free. It goes into Google. It's super easy to bring up. Right now, if we were in a session, I would actually bring up a Jamboard, ask you questions, and have you post stuff on it. Super, super simple. Google Read Write is great for your special needs kids. So are e-comments and Grammarly. Those are all really good ones. Voice comments. Something for you admins, the email features, if you don't use anything for calendaring, I like Calendly. There's a whole bunch of other ones. If you were to email me, my signature line would say, if you want to book an appointment with me, go to my Calendly link. If you did that, you would see when I'm busy. You can't see what I'm doing, but you're seeing when I'm busy, and you could book an appointment with me. It's really incredibly handy. Virtu is something, if you're Google, Virtu allows you to automatically encrypt an email if you want it to be. This was hugely important for my admin, for my personal counselors, my advisors, for my people who are working with my students of learning needs, to be able to encrypt messages that were going out, because so many people in business, of course, in advancement, because so many people were working remotely, they had to send a lot more emails, and catching somebody or calling them as easily. So what they did is you can write your email and you turn on Virtu and it encrypts it and it'll send it. And then they just unencrypt it on their end. So Virtu, again, that's a Google plugin. Boomerang, if you haven't tried Boomerang, that's an awesome one too. That allows you to schedule emails. And here's an example of how you could use it. We had to do wellness checks every day on people who were coming on campus. And what you can do is you can actually set up a Google form and you put it in an email, and then you can set up Boomerang. And let's say every day I wanted to go out at 7 a.m. to the class of 2023. And I could schedule that. And then every day, Monday through Friday only, it would go out to the entire class of 2023. If they were coming on campus, they could fill out the form and their wellness check would be done. So Boomerang allows you to write emails and schedule their release. Again, that's a Google one. Check that one out as well. So what did it all look like? Well, when we were allowed to come back, California, remember, we have a very conservative governor, conservative in the way of how he approached the pandemic. And so when Newsom allowed us to start to come back in person, and the county did, we had to come back with a lot of restrictions. We didn't bring our kindergarten back until after the Christmas holiday. So when they came back, this is what the kindergarten classroom looked like. Now, this doesn't look like our normal kindergarten classrooms. There's no cozy little rug. There's no little poofs to sit on or reading corners or anything like that. Instead, what you see is you see old-fashioned desks that have places for you to put your books. On the back of the chairs was a place to put more books. And then they all had plexiglass around them. And notice the markings on the floor. They're all 6 feet away from each other. Additionally, in the front of the room, the teacher's podium has, again, a plexiglass shield around it. And there's a projector you can see there, the one with the speaker above it. But below that is what looks like a television. That's actually something called a D10. And that allows the teachers to have a hybrid session going on where the students at home can see what's going on in the classroom, they can hear what's going on in the classroom, and they can participate. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, in the bottom corner, you're going to see that there is a teacher there who's working with a student one-on-one. Notice they're both masked. They're sitting there with plexiglass between them, and then there's a little slot there to pass the work back and forth between them. And that's how we were having to do one-to-one tutoring and assistance with students. A couple of issues that I found, and these were 2 issues that we anticipated and had to prepare for when the teachers returned. So how are kids going to hear you when they're behind plexiglass, they're 6 feet away, and they're wearing masks? How are you going to hear them? Now, I never solved how a teacher can hear a kindergartner with a mask on and plexiglass 6 feet away. I looked at all kinds of things, even getting them little karaoke mics, anything I could find. Nothing was going to work for that. The kids just had to speak up. But for the teacher to be heard, I found a couple of solutions. Now, the best and the cheapest thing I found was I Googled on Amazon, or I Amazoned, I guess you would say, tour guide microphone speakers. And if you see over the side, that's what I found. They were $35 each. They were simple, super, super simple. You can get them wired or wireless. I found that if I got the wireless ones, they lost the headsets, so I got wired ones. And what they did is they clipped the speaker part on their belts, put the microphone over their head with a mask on, and it was just enough amplification that it kept them from straining their voices, talking loudly through the mask, and it allowed the students to be able to hear them. Super simple. The teachers loved them. They said they save their voices, and actually they want to keep them, because even in their own classrooms with, larger classrooms, it will help them and save their voices. The other thing I got was we had a lot of outdoor classrooms, and so I had to get portable speakers with microphones, because I knew that with masks on and teachers and kids spread out and being outdoors, kids weren't going to hear the teacher well. So what I looked at was, believe it or not, like boombox kind of things. These are speakers that the teacher can roll out. They're battery operated, so they can plug them into the wall to recharge them at night. They roll them out to their classroom. They can put on a microphone, and they can talk to the kids. I had 2 microphones per speaker, so like teachers were teaching in the classroom, they would tag off, who was teaching there. And so each one had their own microphone set hooked up to their speaker. These worked really well. I am going to be reusing those as well. And those are often being wanted to be used by like the advancement department. Just pull them up, set them up for some sort of outside thing we're doing, like our chili cook-off. They can just bring a speaker out there and they have a microphone already attached to it. So we're going to be reusing those. Now you can integrate microphones into your classroom speakers if you have them. That was like really expensive, and I looked into it and decided I didn't want to do it, but there is that option as well. Here's a look at one of our outdoor classrooms. This is what it looked like. Notice kids are sitting pretty far apart, and it's kind of a tough way to hear. So when we came back, we had to provide hybrid teaching. Now, California State required that all public schools do this, and we basically followed along with that. So we had to have hybrid teaching. What that meant was, of course, you've heard the term roomers and Zoomers. We had some kids that were in the room, other kids that were at home. And we had to provide a way for those kids at home to have some kind of a classroom experience. Now, for those of you that watch this going on, and for me, having studied all of these different types of teaching remotely, I will tell you, this kind of hybrid teaching is the worst kind of education that has ever been invented. Nobody gets a good experience. The kids in class maybe do, but the kids at home, it's far worse than if the teacher was just doing a virtual class. Because the teacher, it's like teaching, it's like the teacher has to bilocate. They have to teach these kids that are in the classroom, and they have to teach the kids that are online. And a teacher just can't do that. It's just, it really is impossible, but it didn't matter. We had to do it anyway, right? So we did what we could do. So I want to show you some of the things here, and here the links are, if you want. And quite frankly, I've written the complete skill sets out of how to do this well. So if you want them at the end, you can email me. If you have to do this for next year, I'm happy to send you how to use any of these. The swivel is the little one in the center. It's the one here that has the iPad sitting on it. What it does is the teacher wears a little device, a little IR device that's around their neck. And as the teacher moves around the room, the iPad follows them. So as the teacher speaks, it kind of follows them, which is really nice. So it stays on the teacher. So the teacher is on a Zoom room with that. So the kids at home can see that, but the kids can also, you project what's on the projector. A little complicated for me to explain, but that's why I said we have the skill steps for how to do it. The owl looks like the owl on this picture. The owl also follows you around. My teachers didn't like the owl, but there are a lot of schools that loved the owl. It has a great microphone in it, really picks up well, and it will follow the speaker. So not just the teacher, but who's ever speaking. The problem with both of these is that if you're trying to have it capture the whiteboard, it will see the teacher writing on the whiteboard, but it will not see what the teacher is writing. There's no way to pick that up. It's just too far away. The D10, which you saw in that kindergarten classroom a couple of minutes ago, the D10 is a television that has complete Zoom capabilities built in it. It is a conferencing television. So there is a camera, a really good camera that gets a really wide angle, will capture your whole classroom up there at the top. There's also a bar up there that is a wonderful speaker and microphone. So it'll capture anybody in the room talking. I used this recently. We had our last board meeting, the only board meeting we had of the whole year face-to-face, but it was still in a very large room. We did it in a cafeteria. Everybody was spread out. We had to still be 6 feet apart with masks on. And we had several people that could not attend because they were immunocompromised. They couldn't come. And we were able to remote them in. One of them even gave her report to the board this way. And it was fascinating how well it worked. So the D10s were also great, I found, for our outdoor classrooms. So they're portable, move them around. They were great for the outdoor classrooms because projecting outdoors, it was hard to see. But using this, it's very clear like a television, very bright. So those are the most expensive by far, but they do work the best. But I for my money, I like the swivel. I think the swivel works great. So again, planning and identifying the needs of the faculty. If you remember, these were the things, the considerations we were. What are we taking forward? Well, this is what we're going to continue with. The document cameras were a huge hit. Most teachers, there's no way they're giving those up. And if we have to go into remote again, whether it's the pandemic, we get a resurgence because of any of the new strains, or in California, we've seen a lot of wildfires lately. We've had to shut down, not because we were close to the fires, but because we had such bad air quality. We couldn't have kids going in and out of the buildings, okay, because we're not one building. I have air monitors in our buildings to see. And like I'm on the 3rd floor of this big, huge main building, the air quality up here was terrible. And so we couldn't be in it. So if we have to shut down again for those, we no longer just have to not do anything. We'll make these kids all go remote. The teachers will take their document cameras home. They already have laptops, and they will do remote teaching. So we can easily do that. I surveyed the teachers, as I told you, about the software licenses, and they wanted to keep the software. But I also surveyed them about Zoom. Are they going to continue to use them next year? And our teachers were pretty adamant they want to continue using Zoom next year. Where how they really liked using them was when they needed to talk to parents and when they needed to give a child some additional assistance. It is super easy to just, a kid emails you with a problem and say, hey, let's go into a Zoom session. Here's the link, meet me. Our people who are learning needs people could easily help the kids. The kids are in an office hour, or they're, have a break from class and they're like, hey, can you help me with this? I still don't get this problem. Immediately open up a Zoom session. We're like, all right, okay, we'll do that. As I said, the teachers love the microphones. They want to keep those. They say it'll help their voices in the classroom. I'm all for it. $35, cheapest piece of technology I've ever bought. Also, we now know these teachers can do it. So instead of these very basic technology obligations, we've ramped that up. You now know how to use these class management systems. So now you have to use them, and you have to use them well. And you need to put all the stuff in there so students know where to find things after hours. You need to start using this more for turning in a paper. And I think we're going to get there. I'm pretty excited about it. What we don't want to happen is to go back to pre-pandemic. We're moving forward. What about students? Well, again, here are our considerations. We are adjusting our schedule again. We're probably going to go much more back to a traditional, one that we had pre-pandemic. So we still don't have all the rules and regs yet in California, and I don't think we're going to get them until August about what we're going to be allowed to do. We know that they have reduced the number of kids that can be in preschool, which did cause us to have to put some buildings together pretty quickly for kindergarten for next year, because the preschool needs to take over a couple of our kinder classes. But we know that we are going to have the ability to do virtual classes if we need them, again, in case of fire or earthquake. We also found that they enjoyed being able to do some virtual class meetings and collaboration. And the teachers wanted to be able to continue to do collaborations with their colleagues this way in Zoom. The other thing is hybrid teaching. Now, I don't know where you are on this. California is not mandating next year that the public schools have a virtual option. However, some public schools are having a hybrid track. And some of them are having a virtual track. So when we came back, we finally didn't get back to full capacity until, quite frankly, after Easter break here in California in our school. And at that point, we still had kids who were out, so we had to offer hybrid. Now, we had some parents take advantage of this, and stop me if you've heard this before, but we had parents who decided that, hey, we're going to go out of town on Friday, so I was wondering if you could just send me the Zoom link so that my 8th graders could just Zoom to the class while we're on vacation. Well, that was pretty annoying to the principal. We had the hybrid Zoom links for the kids that legitimately could not come. There was, immunocompromisation in their family. Maybe they had been exposed. We don't know, right? But that was what it was for. We had parents take advantage of this. And so my question to the admins are, what's our policy going to be? Because for me, as the director of tech, that's a massive decision. Does it mean I design my classroom so that they can all be hybrid? What does that mean for the school? What are our policies around that? Now, we all know that we have kids every year who go out for medical reasons, and they're out for quite a while. Maybe they have, mono and they're not sick, but they can't come to school, or perhaps they're on mental illness and they need to be at home. But if we could continue their schooling, even if it's not the best by being hybrid, it would be fantastic for both the students and the teacher. So I'm good doing hybrid. The principals are like, no, we're not going to do it. But I'm not so sure that I'm not going to be hit about this, the day before they need it, which is going to be hard to set up. So we're still looking at that. The verdict is still out about what we're going to do. We also know that this increase in the learning management system is going to be huge for our students. Having everything in one place, having all teachers use it, all teachers put their homework assignments in there by 4 o'clock every day is going to be huge. And we think that will really be a tremendous help for our students moving forward. Well, what about the needs for the support personnel, office staff, college counselors, advisors, even our campus ministry? What were some of the things we had to think about for them? Well, a lot of it had to do with making those home offices, right? We needed to get home offices set up for these folks as well. The other thing we had to think about, especially with our counselors and with our learning needs people, is HIPAA compliance in these virtual rooms. Now, if you had to deal with this, I don't know what you used. I gave you 4 different ones here. We use Zoom HIPAA compliance. If you didn't have one or you think you might need one, I would highly suggest looking at doxy.me. I had my counselors use this one and they thought it was great. But because we had already purchased so many licenses in Zoom, I was able to get the HIPAA compliance in Zoom for free because Zoom will charge you for it. They will have you can make your own BAA with them. It's super simple. You fill out a form and you get it. The great thing about it is that it makes the room HIPAA compliant so they can have those conversations that are about 504s, IEPs, if you have those, about kids that are having mental stress, any of those other ones that are privileged information. You can have them in these rooms because they're HIPAA compliant. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Again, DoxyMe is great. Here were some of the things that we came up with besides HIPAA compliance. We needed to have home offices set up for them. As you probably found too, it's expensive. You got one office at home and one office at school because some of these people were bilocating in both places. They had to remote into services that were on campus. For me, that's a security risk. Somebody else could tunnel in with that. So I had to really be careful about what I allowed and who I allowed doing that. They really want to continue with the virtual meetings. Our college counselors loved having the large meetings and also the webinars. So a large meeting, again, allows you to have extra chairs in a regular Zoom room. Okay, so they could have meetings with the entire class of 2021, and they could have a whole meeting with it, college counseling could, and every kid would be on the screen, and the kids could ask questions, and they could interact, throw them into breakout rooms. And that worked really well when they had like virtual college people from different colleges visit. They could put different universities in different breakout rooms, and then kids could choose to go to a room. That was awesome. The other thing we used it for is our social justice teach-in. And again, they could go into different breakout rooms to hear different speakers. We purchased the webinar from Zoom, and it wasn't cheap, but boy, it was useful. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but our college counselors loved it and they want to continue it. And what they did, what the webinar does is the webinar does not allow you to do breakout rooms, but it does allow for a Q&A and chat. You don't see everybody in the boxes, but they're all there watching it. So college counseling loved using that. They would have whole big family parent meetings. They did like the junior night to kick off their college counseling experience. We used it for masses. This is what we did for our whole school masses, and everybody logged in. It was great. We also did it for our TEDx. So our TEDx was done. If you want to see a TEDx, we have it on if you go to our website, you can find our TEDx site. And we did that completely through a webinar as well. So it was really wonderful. And so we are going to keep those next year because we found that for some things, this really did make people's jobs easier. The college counseling department found so many more parents came to these meetings because they could host them and they didn't have to leave their homes or offices. So that was pretty huge. I think that as I said, is something that we will continue because of that. So what about the admin? Well, these are our, admin when you start thinking about all of these folks and the things that they might have needed. Now you can see over there on the side, I have my home office set up because I was working from home for a long time. Now, as you can see, I'm back in my office, but I was working from home, and this is what my home office looked like. And if you notice, I have a standing desk. I have an ergonomic keyboard and mouse because I have pretty hefty carpal tunnel. I have a really large screen. I never did the dual screen, but I have a really large one screen. And then I have a wobble board down there that I stand on, which kind of keeps me from fidgeting because I'm a little bit of a fidgeter. And that's what my home office looks like. I even brought home a whiteboard, and I have a pin board up there with all of my, things that I've been working on. So we also had these other people that we had to deal with and what they were going to do. Now, business really wanted dual monitors. So I was able to luckily find a bunch of refurbished ones that I got for very inexpensively and was able to outfit them. But here you can think about what that was. HR, business, they had to have dual monitors at home and dual monitors at school. They took their laptop back and forth. It was a lot. And a lot of them didn't have laptops because they worked on desktops at school. So that was even more equipment that we had to outlay. Now, moving forward, what of that are we going to keep? So that's a good question. Oh, sorry, we'll get to that in a few minutes. But what of that are we going to keep? What kind of remoting in are we going to allow people to do? Another thing we found are policy additions or adjustments. Now, we always had in our contract this disruption of school operations. And it was always, as you can see, power outages, earthquakes, that was the big one in our area. But we had never put in there about a global pandemic or an epidemic. So ours said that we would be closed for no more than, I think, a week before we'd be back face to face, thinking that, if it was an earthquake, we'd find another place and have school, right? If it was a fire, we'd find another place and we'd have school. We never anticipated that we would be out for such an extended period of time that we needed to spool up a virtual school. So during the year of the spring of 2020, we had our lawyers help us draft up an addendum, and all the parents had to sign that. But for this year, we had to put it in the contract. And so I highlighted those things that were the most important that we had to do, that we would institute distance learning, that if we have to close, we're going to institute distance learning. Because probably many of you we had parents coming back saying, well, if you're going remote, then we should get a tuition discount. Or if you're going remote, we're leaving the school and we're not paying our bill. So we had to make some adjustments, and it was pretty tough. And I'm sure you guys had that as well. I will say that we did lose families. What was interesting is our head of school gave them the option, said, you know what, if you need to leave, you want to find something else, fine. If you'd like, we can hold your place maybe next year. You'll have to let us know by a certain date or whatever. And it was amazing to me. I mean, we had very few that didn't come back. Some of them ended up moving out of state permanently. But, the parents didn't find the grass was greener. And so they came back, which was really interesting because everybody was struggling with what to do. It wasn't like we didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do. This was unprecedented. Okay, a couple of other things. Vaccinations. And I bring this up because this happened to us. So when our kindergartners started back, we had a kindergarten parent reach out and say, is your teacher immunized? And the teacher was like, am I supposed to answer that? Because the parent was like, well, if they're not immunized, we're not bringing them back. Well, that's medical information. And you may very well have employees, as we do, that have very legitimate reasons why they cannot be immunized. We're also going to have students that way. So our high school students can be immunized now, but we're going to have high school students that can't be. And, we hope that herd mentality helps them. But at the same time, nobody has a right to that medical information. So we have had to tell our faculty and our staff what their response is for that, so that parents can't ask. And if they do ask, they're told this is medical information and we can't let you know what percentage of our faculty and staff or our students are immunized at this point. But here's some questions for you. And I don't know the answers to these. Are you going to retain or collect immunization records for your faculty and staff concerning the vaccine? And what about students? Now, our governor has not mandated that everybody must be immunized, or everybody who can at this point be immunized. He did mandate that for other vaccines in the past. So it is possible he will, but at this point, he has not mandated that. Now, California state universities and the UC system have mandated that all students coming to college in the fall must be immunized. So they're going to have to show proof of immunization. But at our school, We don't, but our nurses have already been, so we have a nurse on each side of campus, and our nurses have already been getting immunization records from our parents for the high schoolers. So they're sending them in, and the nurses are adding them into our system. But at this point, we are not requiring it. Who knows? I mean, that may change by August. Lord knows these rules change on us every single week. So we're just trying to keep up. Retention of the COVID-19 documents. So what did we collect? And I'm sure yours may be very different, but if you came on campus, we had to have you check in and check out, and that was an automated system. It time stamps you and it location stamps you. That was for contact tracing for in case of an exposure. We also had you do a daily wellness check, and those are those COVID questions. Have you been exposed? Do you have any of these, fever, coughing, blah, blah, blah. And we ask those every day. We also required anybody who was coming on campus, and this is P through faculty staff, you had to be COVID tested every week. We provided it here on campus. And so those results went straight to the nurse. So they were digital, went straight to the nurse. So school's over. We went to the lawyer and we said, what of this do we have to retain? Because this is not in my data retention and destruction policy. I didn't have these. And this is what they told us. So employee medical records are records that are kept inside of an employee file, and they are separate from the rest of the employee file. This is where we need to keep those weekly COVID testings. We also need to put the daily wellness checks if they contain medical information. So if they answered yes, basically they have to go in here. If they answered no, they didn't have any of these things, we don't need them. We don't need to keep those. But the yeses we do. We also have to keep, there's an employee exposure notifications that also go in employee files. So with contact tracing, so if you were exposed, the nurses contact trace to figure out who you might have come in contact with. And then they send out exposure notifications to those people, and those people have to then go home and quarantine. Those exposure notifications do need to go in the files and be retained. Now they need to be kept in a separate file for the length of employment plus 30 years. Now you can imagine this is going to be a pain to do all this. So before you start doing this and start coming out of unglued, check with your lawyer and see if you have to do that based on your, but what your lawyer says. But this is ours, Cal OSHA requirements that our lawyer said that we have to do. So this isn't going to be fun, but this is what we're going to have to do for the summer. Now students are a little different. Students had to check in and out. Students also did wellness checks, and they did have the COVID testing. But it's not the same requirements for students and for our visitors that came on campus, because visitors also have to check in and out. When they check in and out, they do the wellness questions. So normally at the end of a year, all of those visitor check-ins, and you might be doing them by paper. We used to do them by paper, and now we do them digitally. But every June, we purged them. We just got rid of them. We didn't have to keep them. Our retention policy said, get rid of them at the end of June. We don't need them anymore. We don't know about this yet. So we're going to keep them for a whole nother year, and then we're going to purge them just in case. The student wellness checks and the retaining any COVID-19 that might have been positive among students and the contact tracing. We're also, the lawyer says, we don't know. We don't know if laws are going to change. Said you might want to internally keep them just to see if anything changes between now and, this next fall. We just decided that to make things easy, we're going to retain all those documents for 1 year. So this time next year, we're going to purge all of that stuff. But it's different for faculty and staff. So admin needs. Remember, these were the people that we were talking about. What are we doing moving forward? We've got an entirely trained staff now who knows how to do online teaching. We're not going to lose that momentum, and we want to take advantage of it. So what can we do? We're going to form a task force and figure out, can we do some online classes? We have been doing them in the high school for years now, where we have a few classes that sometimes they meet face-to-face and other times they meet online. We're looking at expanding that. Why not? We have a bunch of teachers that can do it. Maybe we expand that. Maybe we start thinking about a 3 semester instead of a 2 semester year. Maybe summer becomes another semester and kids can lighten their load in the fall. Let's say if you're playing football and take some courses, semester long courses in the summer. Some options there. It's open now, right? Because we know they're trained. Home offices and equipment, and this is remoting in and requirements for working at home. We're struggling with it now, and I'm sure you are too. People are very used to, and they say, hey, I can work from home. Why can't I work from home a few days a week? Business department, advancement, my department, admissions. So we're having to look at that. Are we going to have different kind of requirements? Are we going to allow people to, we have long commutes here in the Bay Area. Maybe we allow some people to actually remote in a few days a week. Maybe that works. So those are some things we're looking at. My team also has become very proficient at remoting into computers to repair them. I don't let my team do it for student computers. I just don't think that's safe, but they do for the adult computers, and they've really appreciated that. They don't have to come to the support center to get help. My team sends them a link and says, click OK to allow me to remote in, and then they can remote in and work on the computers that way. So it is an interesting sort of time we're in, trying to determine about, can we let people work at home? What will that look like? How does that work with HR? How is that equitable? And I am sure you're struggling with the same thing. I want to show you one more thing, and this is just purely if something that you are interested in. So in the spring, in March of 2020, Dr. Diana Neby and I, a colleague, she and I designed this flexible plan for instructional continuity. We designed this seeing what was happening in Asia with the pandemic, and knowing that we were going to start seeing things happen here. Now, we didn't realize that we were going to have 4 days to shut the school down, to train our teachers and shut the school down and go completely remote. I mean, we blasted through these levels. We thought we would, be in level 1 for a few weeks, and then level 2, and then we'd go to level 3. It was like almost immediately that we found ourselves all of a sudden completely remote. So what we did is we designed this plan, and it goes through step by step what you need to think about, how you need to plan. And we wrote it, we shared it out on everywhere we could. We put it on Twitter, LinkedIn, every NCEA, every sort of thing we could think about, and we shared it across the world. It was translated into multiple languages. Schools all over the world gave us feedback on it and said they had used it. We said, use it as much as you can. We gave it in a form that they could actually just was it Google Docs? Do it, just, attribute us, but go through and just use it as you can. And it was pretty amazing how it was used. So if you're interested in the plan, I gave you a tiny URL. Please go, let me know if you have any questions. I am happy to help you if it's something that could help your school. I think that's wonderful. Moving forward, these are just some questions that I really want you to think about as you go through and you start planning for next year. What do you need to change and adjust? What learning did you have? What policies do you need to change now? Like I showed you, we had to change our contract. We had to change our data retention policy. We had to account for all of this stuff. We even had to, we had to have cameras on campus too. And some of our cameras were used to capture license plates. So we have license plate readers here. And so we had to add that retention in. And so just think about that sort of thing. What kind of technology can you use to make things easier for your families? I know my head of school is totally sold on using the webinars for his town hall meetings instead of using, he was able to keep people informed the whole time through using the webinar features. He wants to continue it. As a matter of fact, they're doing one on Thursday to talk to the new kindergarten families for these new buildings we're having to build. Give them a little more information, show them a fly through of the new buildings, things like that. Our parent association is stoked. They had triple the amount of people coming to their parent association meetings because they did them via Zoom, because people didn't have to leave work, didn't have to leave home. And they want to continue that. They said they'll have some face-to-face. We all know those touch points are super important, but at the same time, some of these things it's awesome to put them, at home, especially parent association meetings. They can just do them at home instead of all those cars on campus and all that. So just some things to think about. Now, if you have any questions, if there's any more information you need, please reach out to me. My email address is down there. I'm jlopez at shschools.org. I'm also the Technomaven on Twitter. And I am happy as a clam to answer any questions that you might have. So please, if you have anything that's still burning after this discussion, please let me know. And enjoy the rest of your time at the Law Symposium. I hope you truly do enjoy it. And maybe next year we'll be able to see each other in person. So thank you very much. God bless. Take care.